I'd like to thank you for inviting me. Oops. Imagine standing on a ridge with mountains, glaciers, and the ocean in the background, and a seemingly endless sea of penguins in the foreground. Hundreds of thousands of penguins. The sights, the sounds, the smell. There are some experiences in the bird world that almost defy description, and this scene on South Georgia Island is certainly one of them. Most people love penguins, even though they've never seen one in the wild and never will. They stand upright like humans and appear to be wearing tuxedos. Penguins waddle when they walk, which many people think is irresistibly cute. They appear on clothing and tattoos. They were the model for a villain in DC Comics, which was later played by Danny DeVito in the 1992 film Batman Returns. March of the Penguins is the all-time top-grossing nature documentary. Penguins are used to sell books and tabloid newspapers. Theoretical physicists use what they call penguin diagrams because the sketches of subatomic particles resemble a penguin. In Tasmania, there is a town called Penguin. The city of Ushuaia in Southern Argentina is filled with images of penguins. In addition to this ad for a gym and one for city tours, there's a museum selling clothing modeled by penguin mannequins. The museum is full of penguin paintings. It used to be a prison, and penguin art is on the walls of many of the cells. Some cells contain penguin sculptures. There were penguin footprints painted on the walls, and the museum has a lot of penguin statues decorated in whimsical ways. Here's a Holstein penguin and an Argentine soccer penguin. But I wanted to see real penguins. So in 2016, I went on a 3-week trip to the Antarctic and subantarctic, and I saw roughly 1 million of them. The penguin gatherings sometimes were so large and spread out that giving an exact number is impossible. We started in Ushuaia, which is on the southern tip of Argentina. We headed north to Saunders Island in the Falklands, and then to 4 stops on South Georgia Island before heading down towards the Antarctic Peninsula. We stopped at Elephant Island on the way down, and in the South Shetland Islands on the way back. The trip was physically grueling. We were delayed for 27 hours getting out of Ushuaia because of winds that reached 84 knots. The boat was severely rocking for most of the 18 days we were on it. I don't get seasick, but some people on the boat started to get seasick in the first hour. The trip was operated by the Seagram's Company, one of whose founders was Peter Harrison. He wrote the guide to the seabirds of the world, and he's working on a revision. There were 110 paying passengers, most of whom were not birders. I was in a Victor Emmanuel subgroup of 11 led by my cousin, Michael O'Brien, who's standing next to me here. He's the co-author of the Guide to the Shorebirds of North America. I roomed with his father, Paul, and next to Paul is Michael's brother, John. So it was a bit of a family affair. For the birders, it was like being on an 18-day pelagic trip with some zodiac rides thrown in. Oops. Penguins are associated with Antarctica, but they're found throughout the southern hemisphere, as far north as the Galapagos Islands near the equator. No penguin species regularly occurs in the northern hemisphere. Here are 2 Galapagos penguins I saw in 2013. The penguin family experiences as great a range of temperatures as any bird family. Their average body temperature is one of the lowest in the bird world and roughly equal to that of humans. There are 18 species of penguins in the world, and I've seen half of them. Let me introduce you to the 7 I saw on this trip. The king penguin is the second largest penguin species in the world. An adult king penguin stands almost 3 feet tall and can weigh more than 30 pounds. We saw close to 750,000 of them in South Georgia and more in the Falklands. The Gentoo penguin, the third largest penguin species, is widespread. We saw a lot of them in the Falklands, South Georgia, and Antarctica. Gentoos are the fastest swimming bird species, reaching speeds of more than 22 miles per hour. We saw a few chinstrap penguins in South Georgia, but we saw many more when we reached the Antarctic Peninsula. They're the fourth largest penguin species. They look comical, resembling German soldiers during World War I wearing a helmet with a chin strap. In South Georgia, I saw all three of these species together, and you can see the relative sizes of the Gentoo, the chinstrap, and the king penguin. Magellanic penguins are named after the explorer Ferdinand Magellan, who spotted the birds in 1520. They undertake the longest migration of any flightless bird, going north of the Antarctic, sometimes as far as the waters north of Rio de Janeiro. We saw a small colony of them in the Falklands. They're the penguins people tend to see first on Antarctic trips from Argentina because they're in the Beagle Channel near Ushuaia and in the Drake Passage just beyond that. The Beagle Channel was named after Darwin's ship. Southern rockhopper penguins were one of the 2 species we saw on the trip with Cress. A colony of them was on the Falklands. They're the smallest of the 7 species. The other crested species was the macaroni penguin. The only ones we saw were a small group in South Georgia. The song Yankee Doodle has a line about how he put a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. The song dates back to the 1700s. American colonists were referring to foppish Englishmen nicknamed macaronis who wore ornate clothing, often including feathered hats. They were called macaronis because a lot of them were rich men who had been to Italy and had tasted macaroni, which was little known in other places at the time. The song ridicules American colonists who tried to dress like the English fops. Adelie penguins are the southernmost and oldest known penguin species. They're small and extremely entertaining. The name comes from Adelie Land, an Antarctic territory named after the wife of the French explorer Jules Dumont d'Urville. We didn't see any until we got near the Antarctic Peninsula, where we saw large colonies of them. The colonies are somewhat odoriferous, and my cousin Michael calls the birds smelly adelies. They have an eye ring that can look either white, pale blue, or lavender, depending on the way the light hits it. Only the adults have the eye ring, and it gives them an appearance of constant astonishment. Nobody is sure of the origin of the word penguin, but a common explanation is that it comes from the Welsh pen, meaning head, and gwyn, meaning white, to describe the great auk in the northern hemisphere. The great auk was in the alcid family, which includes the puffins. Because of convergent evolution, penguins look like alcids, and they were thought to be the same types of birds, even though the 2 families are not closely related. Audubon did a painting of great auks, and you can see the white on the head. Great auks were flightless, and they were exterminated during the 19th century by Europeans who went into the auk breeding colonies and killed them for their feathers and other parts. All of the remaining alcid species can fly. Many of the predators of alcids are land-based, so they need flight to escape. Among the major predators of penguins are seals and other sea mammals from whom they can escape by means other than flying. Penguins are ancient birds who first appeared on the fossil record from 60 million years ago. About 50 species of penguins are extinct. The oldest fossils of modern penguins are 11 to 13 million years old. The largest penguin, the largest extinct penguins penguin was from New Zealand and thought to weigh up to 165 pounds. Emperor penguins, the largest penguin species still alive, they weigh a little more than 50 pounds. We didn't see any emperor penguins on the trip. They're found farther inland in Antarctica from where we went. Penguins have evolved a form of camouflage called countershading. This is a useful strategy for seabirds, and many seabird families have evolved this type of monochrome coloration, including the Antarctic shag standing behind the prone Adelie penguin. Penguins are black on the back and white underneath, and if a predator looks down from above, the surface of the ocean looks dark and a black back will be difficult to see. If a predator in the sea looks up from underwater, the surface of the ocean looks light because of the reflection of the sky, and a white belly will be difficult to see. And the white belly will also be more difficult for a penguin's prey to see. The color configuration also helps the birds to regulate their body temperature. Birds who spend most of their life in frigid water need black feathers on their back to absorb as much heat as possible. But in the summer during the nesting season, they can turn their white breast towards the sun to reflect heat. Black feathers contain the pigment melanin that makes them more durable. Feathers of birds living in the middle of the sea exposed to the elements suffer a greater wear and tear than the feathers of birds in more sheltered environments. The dark backs on the dark surface of the sea makes watching penguins at sea very unsatisfying. They prefer to dive or swim quickly rather than sitting on the surface. So you usually get at best only a very quick look. To see penguins well, you have to go to the colonies where they breed or congregate. They don't seem to mind people walking near them as long as you don't get too close. Some of the penguins acted very curious about the taller, upright creatures with the strange gear. On Paulet Island, my cousin Michael and I were walking down a hill when an Adelie rushed towards us with a youngster. We froze and watched the adult feed the chick from a few feet away. Those are Michael's legs in the photo. On the same hill, another inquisitive Adelie wanted to peck at Michael's trousers. Male and female penguins have similar plumage, but the males are slightly larger and heavier. While penguins look short-legged, they actually possess long and mobile leg bones. Their waddling walk is an energy-saving technique based on the pendulum effect. In addition to waddling, some penguins hop. Southern rockhopper penguins are named because they hop a lot on rocky shorelines. These Adelies are making their way down a treacherous rocky slope. Be careful, be careful. Whoop, 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 whoop. One gets the impression that penguins are pretty tough critters. Here is a chinstrap penguin on the Antarctic Peninsula trying to reach the shore from the icy sea and getting banged around a lot in the process. In addition to waddling and hopping, penguins often toboggan on their bellies. Here are some Adelies moving across an iceberg with a combination of waddling and tobogganing. They sometimes travel considerable distances on their bellies. Penguins seem to engage in play activities. Some of these king penguins appear to be body surfing. At St. Andrews, I saw a king penguin doing what looked like the equivalent of whitewater rafting in a fast-running stream. But the funniest penguin playfulness was in the South Shetland Islands, where some chinstrap and gentoo penguins seemed to be playing king of the hill on a small piece of ice with a 45-degree slope. Here is the chinstrap on the left and the slightly larger gentoo on the right. The penguins took flying leaps and landed on the ice feet first. Sometimes one penguin leapt directly into another, causing both to tumble into the water. Others fell into the water without being hit by another penguin. When they were falling, they waved their flippers as if tumbling uncontrollably. The contest was not between the chinstraps and the gentoos, but rather a free-for-all with every penguin for itself. No food was on the ice, so all of this appeared to be happening just for the sheer fun of it. Alexander Skutch wrote in The Minds of Birds, quote, "It is highly improbable that natural selection could promote such activities as sliding down a smooth inclined plane, repeatedly shooting rapids, or riding an ice floe or the jet from a garden hose, when such sport contributes nothing to birds' survival or reproduction and requires situation rare in their lives. Of all our reasons for believing that birds are feeling creatures who find satisfaction in their lives, their frolics are the most convincing." Penguins often swim like other waterfowl, but they do it in much more difficult conditions. Here are some king penguins swimming. You might have noticed in the King of the Hill segment that some of the penguins were porpoising. They propel themselves through the water by arcing their body above the surface as porpoises do. This allows them to swim faster than any other type of birds. Penguins are the only birds capable of doing this. This photo reminds me of Michael Phelps swimming the butterfly. Penguins can dive deeper and hold their breath longer than any other type of bird. These adelies can hold their breath underwater for up to 6 minutes. They go about 65 feet below the surface on a typical dive and have been known to dive as deep as 575 feet. Emperor penguins have been known to stay underwater more than 20 minutes and reach depths in excess of a third of a mile. Penguins have the ability to slow their heart rate during dives, which allows them to stay underwater. They also have mechanisms for controlling their buoyancy. The field of vision of penguins is at least as wide as that of owls, which helps them to capture underwater prey. They can see remarkably well, both on land and in water, because of strong focusing muscles in their pupils. Like other birds, they have nictitating membranes that slide over their eyeballs instead of blinking to lubricate their eyes, which is especially important when they're underwater. They also have unusually flat corneas to minimize refraction, which gives them unsurpassed underwater vision. To once again look at the skeleton, penguin wings share the skeletal structure of other birds, but their bones are flattened and rigidly joined, shaping them into smooth, soft paddles best suited for rapid propulsion in a dense medium such as water. Unlike most other diving birds, penguins propel themselves with their wings and steer with their feet. Rotating shoulder sockets allow enough twist to generate thrust with both up and down wing strokes, a trait shared only with the hummingbirds. The twisting flipper motion some penguins use when swimming is currently being studied by scientists to develop robot technology for improving the efficiency and performance of underwater vehicles, including those used for spying. Um, Penguins sometimes yawn and they often shake their heads. Like all seabirds, penguins can drink seawater. They have special glands behind their eyes that can filter out excess salt, which drips into their nostrils. And when they shake their heads, the salt flies out. All penguins have soft backwards pointing barbs lining the inside of their bill, as well as on their tongue and upper throat. And this enables them to grab and swallow slippery prey underwater without the help of gravity. You can see the spiked tongue better in this shot. In penguin species most adapted to cold climates, such as this Adelie, the feathers grow partially down the bill to provide more insulation. Penguins have robust and versatile feet with protective scales. You can see the gripping claws on this Adelie. The claws allow better footing on wet or slippery surfaces such as ice, mud, or steep rocks. When swimming, the webbed feet serve as rudders. The feet also help to regulate their body temperature. Here is the sole of a foot of a dead king penguin. Note the little nipples that resemble the sole of a running shoe. Penguins are among the relatively small group of birds who have only 3 toes on each foot rather than 4, a trait they share with the alcids. You can see here there's a vestigial 4th toe, which is sort of disappearing from disuse. And here are some 3-toed king penguin footprints. As with the king penguin, Magellanic penguins have black feet. Here is a Magellanic penguin resting on its belly. Magellanics have bare pink skin around the eye and at the base of the bill. Among the flocks we saw swimming near our ship on our way back to Ushuaia was a leucistic one who looked tan rather than black. Also notice the texture of the feathers on its back. Here is a close-up of a king penguin's back. It looks like a computer circuit board with a lot of very small knobs packed tightly together. The plumage of penguins is the densest of any bird family. They have feathers all over their body except their bill and feet. The silky outer surface reduces friction. The outer feathers overlap tightly like fish scales, protecting a layer in which air is trapped for insulation. The insulation has evolved to keep penguins warm in both air and water. In warm weather, penguins are in serious danger of overheating. Some penguins suffering from heat stress eat snow to cool down if it's available. When molting, new feathers push out the old, revealing their true shape as they gradually fall off. The feathers become faded from the sun and exposure to salt water. In some colonies we visited, parts of the ground were covered with a lot of molted penguin feathers. Penguins preen to maintain waterproofing and insulation and to replenish the air trapped within their feathers. The preen gland is at the base of the tail, and they can preen even while at sea. To get at all of their feathers while preening, they sometimes have to significantly contort their bodies. The preen gland is roughly in this area. Adelies, chinstraps, and gentoos are in the genus Pygocellus, which means rump-tailed. The tails of these penguins are longer and stiffer than in other penguin species. Penguin tails also help them to balance when standing upright. The tail helps them to steer when they're swimming as well. Researchers have examined the yellow head feathers of several penguin species, such as the plumes of macaronis, and discovered that they contain a unique pigment not found in other bird species. These feathers reveal a fluorescent yellow-green color under a UV lamp. Not only was it a previously unknown pigment, but it appears to represent an entirely new class of pigments, unlike the more common carotenoid and melanin-based pigments in most birds. It may serve as a form of advertisement to potential mates. Some penguins get dirty as they go about their daily business. We sometimes saw penguins with wounds, and some of the wounds were bloody. Some wounds come from sliding on their bellies. Other penguin wounds are inflicted by seals, sea lions, orcas, or other penguins. Penguins sometimes fight with each other, which can involve bites, kicks, and flipper blows until one runs away. A lot of aggression in penguin colonies consists of posturing and slapping, but other times serious wounds can be inflicted. I took this footage in a king penguin colony. Occasionally, there will be a conflict between two different penguin species, such as this king penguin who is pecking at a smaller chin strap on South Georgia. Chin straps were not at all common there, and I'm not sure that this chin strap was well. The plumage of penguin chicks varies considerably by species. Young Gen 2 penguins look like grayish miniature versions of the adults. While Adelie penguins chicks don't have any white feathers. But the penguin chicks with the most entertaining plumage variations were the king penguins. The young birds look like Sasquatch covered with what looks like brown hair. Some are fatter than the adults. Large king penguin chicks in their thick winter coats of down were once thought to be a different species called the woolly penguin. Here is a very young king penguin chick sleeping. It looks more like a rodent. The adult birds have a yellow-orange band that goes from the chin to the breast. They have a teardrop-shaped yellow-orange mark around their ear. The birds take 2 or 3 years to pass into full adult plumage. The second year birds look like adults, but have lemon yellow areas like the penguin on the left, instead of yellow orange areas like the one on the right. Unlike other birds, penguins can't afford to replace a few feathers at a time, and instead, once a year, they come ashore, usually just before winter, and engage in a catastrophic molt, which means they grow all of their feathers at once. It usually takes 2 to 4 weeks, and during this time, they can't go into the water because they're not waterproof. Often the old feathers don't fall out until the new ones grow in, which results in strange looking intermediate molt patterns. Some appear to be wearing earmuffs or headphones. Some have manes like lions. Some look like a diva wearing a fur stole. Some appear to be wearing parkas and long underwear. This one had a hairy bow tie along with a hairy belly. I probably could have done an entire program only on king penguins. Most penguins make their nests out of stones. Penguins don't carry nest material for long distances. They use what's nearby. The stones are important for the drainage of meltwater that could damage the eggs. In some areas, nest stones are difficult to find, and female Adelie penguins have been known to resort to prostitution to obtain them. She'll mate with a male in exchange for some of his stones for her nest with a different male. The BBC website had some fun with the story. On the subject of reproduction, the two sexes of Adelies look the same, and a naturalist on our ship said that some band or sex them by looking for footprints on their back. The only two penguin species who don't build nests are the emperor and the king penguins. They balance the egg on their feet. The fold at the bottom of the belly is used to protect eggs and chicks. You can see the king penguin in the middle of the photo here adjusting an egg. King penguin incubation averages 52 to 56 days, shared by both parents in shifts of 12 to 21 days. Chicks born at the beginning of the winter have trouble surviving. At one point, a couple of penguins came onto our ship. The larger male is on the right, and if you look closely, you can see that the female has an egg resting on her feet. Part of courtship behavior for a lot of penguins is for the male to lift his head and bellow towards the sky. Courtship can also involve an encounter such as this one between two king penguins. For those of you familiar with modern dance, it looks a bit like a contact improvisation. The king penguin breeding cycle is 14 to 16 months, so they can breed only twice every 3 years. Also, because the reproductive cycle can last more than a year, you can see most phases of it while visiting a king penguin colony. King penguins are monogamous for the breeding season, but fidelity after that is low. They can breed when 3 to 4 years old, but more likely when they're 5 to 8. In addition to keeping the egg on their feet, king penguins also keep the hatched chick there. King penguin chicks are brooded 31 to 36 days. Because of the size of king penguins, the chicks can't grow to independence within one short Antarctic summer. The penguins head north toward the warmer islands of the subantarctic and take up to 18 months to mature. Gen2s start to breed at age 2 and have high long-term pair fidelity. They usually lay a 2-egg clutch. They rarely lay 1 or 3 eggs. Incubation and feeding nestlings is done by both parents. Gen2s have a broad breeding range with the southern chicks fledging in 62 to 82 days, and the northern ones, where the weather's a little warmer, can take a little longer and take 85 to 117 days. Here you can see a 2-egg clutch in which 1 egg already hatched. It could be that the other egg was infertile. Sometimes the chicks huddle together for warmth and probably for comfort. Here is an adult sleeping on a rock and 3 young Gen2s resting their head on the rock. At Brown Bluff in the Antarctic, this Gen2 chick was probably lost. It was being nipped at and chased by an adult. It might have been looking for its mother, and it probably wasn't going to survive. Adelies start breeding between ages 3 and 5 years. Despite the occasional prostitution, they often stay with the same partner for multiple years. Adelies normally lay 2 eggs 2 to 4 days apart. Incubation lasts 32 to 37 days and is done by both parents, usually with the male first for about 2 weeks while the female forages, followed by a similar period by the female while the male forages. After that, the periods are shorter until the eggs hatch. The chicks hatch a day apart and both of them are raised. Many penguin species, such as the southern rockhoppers, form creches for raising their young. The parents leave their half-grown chicks together for safety while they're out getting food, and such groups are often guarded by 1 or 2 non-breeding neighbors. Southern rockhopper penguins often share breeding space with black-browed albatrosses and imperial cormorants. This albatross colony was near the rockhopper colony. Before they head north, king penguin chicks are also kept in creches. Their parents return to feed them every 5 to 7 days. Some penguin species can keep food in their stomach for a long time without it being digested or spoiling. And scientists are looking at the antimicrobial properties in a penguin's stomach for possible links to substances that can help humans. Penguins regurgitate food down their chick's throat. Krill figures high in the diets of many southern species, but squid and small fish are equally important. Gen 2 parents feed their nestlings for 20 to 37 days, after which the young form creches. But unlike other penguin species, the young undergo a transition period to practice feeding on their own before becoming fully independent. They return to their colony for a few weeks to receive sporadic feeds from their parents before gradually lengthening their own foraging trips. Even after the chicks are born, the adults are still concerned about arranging the stones around the nest. Obviously, one chick does not think much of these efforts. Adelie chicks form creches after 20 to 30 days when both parents leave to forage, returning every 1 to 3 days to feed the chicks. Here is an Adelie chick curled up against a rock. All penguin chicks are insistent in trying to get fed, but there's a different and comical twist with the Adelies. The feeding often involves high-speed chases either before or after the regurgitation of the food, with the adult turning away and running and the chick in full pursuit. You often see chicks tripping over rocks as they try to keep up. Here is an adult being chased by 2 chicks. When food is scarce, only the stronger chick in the clutch survives. There are other perils for penguin chicks. The chicks of Adelies and other penguin species are under constant threat from predators in their colonies. In his book about penguins, Roger Torrey Peterson compared the workings of skuas in a penguin colony to a protection racket. He said the skuas hang around the colonies to feed on eggs, chicks, and sometimes adult birds. Because skuas are territorial, one pair will patrol an area occupied by about 10,000 penguins, and while the skua pair might eat a healthy share of birds and eggs, they prevent the devastation of the colony by driving other skuas away. This system, while brutal, seems to work for both the skuas and the penguins. Here is a skua on the Falklands with a penguin egg. Skuas are not the only avian predators for penguins. At this southern rockhopper colony, striated caracaras lurked, waiting to snatch chicks. In most cases, the predatory birds live and nest in the same areas as the penguin colonies. Snowy sheathbills are scavengers in Antarctica, and they'll eat just about anything, and I mean anything. They steal krill and fish from penguins and sometimes eat their eggs and small chicks. They also eat carrion, animal feces, and where available, human waste. They've been known to eat tapeworms that have been living in a chinstrap penguin's intestines. Other birds who pose a threat to penguins are kelp gulls and giant petrels, both northern and southern. This is a northern giant petrel. Here is one stomping through a king penguin colony. It reminds me a little of a dodo. These are large birds, about as big as mid-sized albatrosses. Penguins also have mammalian predators. They fall prey to orcas, sometimes called killer whales, even though they aren't whales. Orcas hunt in packs like wolves. Here are a couple of orcas who are near our ship. Many penguin colonies are in the same area as colonies of Antarctic fur seals. The two species generally get along, but there are some aggressive encounters. Seals have been known to kill and eat penguins. Antarctic fur seal pups are really cute. Some of them twist their head and look up with their large dark eyes. On Saunders Island, we saw a leucistic one. Sea lions and leopard seals also kill penguins, but elephant seals don't. Some elephant seals live in the same place as penguin colonies. They can dive deeper than any animal. A female dove 5,000 feet, taking 17 minutes to go down and 17 minutes to resurface. They do it slowly, which helps to prevent them from getting the bends. They mostly hunt big fish. Most appeared to be sleeping or simply lying around. They have nose mites, which is why they have snot dripping from their nose, and you frequently hear them snort. When young elephant seals are weaned, they're known as weaners. This is a pun because they lie on the beach like huge sausages who weigh hundreds of pounds. They're sometimes called blubber slugs, which was my favorite word of the trip because they have a thick layer of blubber and lie on the beach like slugs. One of the naturalists on the ship described them as a mouth attached to an anus. Some penguins sleep standing up, and some while they're prone. This king penguin chick has its flippers extended and appears to be dreaming about flying. Many penguins seem to be trying to become airborne. A lot of young penguins who look as if they're trying to fly are exercising their muscles for flying through the water. This prone king penguin is panting. Some penguins lie prone to expose their feet and dissipate heat. Climate change is a huge issue for penguins because they've evolved to retain heat in icy water and extreme cold temperatures. Now that the climate is warming, they run the risk of suffering from severe heat stress and not being able to survive. And the same applies to mammals such as seals. The ability of king penguins to find food can be affected by changes in ocean temperature of as little as several tenths of a degree Celsius, and the oceans are expected to warm by more than that. The changes in temperature affect food supplies, both in location and abundance. Overfishing and oil spills contribute to the food availability problem. The rockhopper colony we saw was significantly diminished from what it had been previously. This appears to be a food problem because of climate change and or overfishing. Tabular icebergs are a major issue. They're chunks of frozen saltwater that break off from ice shelves. You can get some perspective on how big some of them are by comparing them to the zodiac in the foreground. Tabular icebergs don't raise sea level when they break off because they were already in the ocean, but they can have a significant effect on creatures such as penguins. When my cousin Michael was on a similar trip 7 years earlier, he saw one tabular iceberg. On this trip, really big ones were floating all over the place. And I don't know if you saw in the news this week that one the size of Delaware just broke off, and it might be impeding the ability of certain penguin species to feed. Also, the pack ice is declining. Pack ice consists of large pieces of floating ice driven together into a nearly continuous mass. It's the predominant Adelie feeding habitat rather. As the pack ice declines, so does the population of Adelies. The declining ice has opened up more habitat for gentoos, whose numbers are increasing. About 250,000 penguins were on Salisbury Plain in Georgia when I went. The penguin populations have managed to recover from when there were only 318 left at Salisbury early in the 20th century, when millions of penguins were killed by the whalers and others. Joseph Hatch, a New Zealand blubber merchant, over 4 decades in the first half of the 20th century, is estimated to have killed 3 million penguins for their oil. The penguins were put into huge machines called digesters to produce oil for export. And in some places, penguin species were wiped out. A similar carnage was committed with whales in places such as Grytviken, which is shown here. Fur seals were virtually wiped out in the 17 and 1800s. The Antarctic is a magical place where you can see faces in the ice and ducks in the clouds. It's a place where you see death and rebirth. You can see remarkable mammals on land. It's very easy for Americans and other people in the Northern Hemisphere to neglect a place that hardly any of them visit or hear about in the news. But one of many important reasons why people in the North shouldn't neglect the Antarctic ecosystem is that many of its natural wonders are once again being wiped out. During the last century, profiteers from the North went to the Antarctic to kill penguins for the oil in their bodies. In this century, profiteers from the North are remotely contributing to the destruction of penguin habitats in the South by drilling for a different type of oil, not to mention causing the inundation of many coastal cities around the globe that could create hundreds of millions of human refugees. Even if you never go to the Antarctic, be aware that what we all do up here, how we live, what economic decisions we make, has a major impact on what happens there. And the fate of a million of my friends might depend on how we respond to what's currently happening. But that's all I have to say. And let me, wait a minute, whoops, my video is off. There we go. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has. We almost made it through without getting to.
We have 2 questions in the chat. Dillard would like to know, do penguins use their claws to catch prey, or do they only catch fish using their beaks? Also, do they eat anything else besides fish?
They eat a lot of krill, which is the same thing that whales eat. And they eat, I'm pretty sure they eat squid, and they eat a lot of the different types of sea life in the water, because they don't have a whole lot of choice. But they do not use their feet. They mostly hunt with their bills.
Awesome. And Marian Callahan would like to know, are all species alike in egg laying and chick rearing?
No, as I said, the penguins, even though most people think of them as birds of the Antarctic, they occur all the way north to the equator. They don't occur in the northern area, even though a few have managed to slip across the equator the furthest north they generally get is the Galapagos. But most penguins lay eggs and build very simple nests with stones. Others, like the king penguin and the emperor, balance the eggs on their feet. And and in terms of how long the fledging period takes, that can even differ within species, depending on whether they're in the north part of their range or in the southern part of their range. So it's there's quite a lot of variety in the different breeding habits.
Great. At this point, I would like to invite the audience to unmute themselves if you want to ask a question directly to William, or if you would like to continue using the chat and ask any lasting questions that you will have, you're welcome to do so.
While we have a little bit of a lull, I did want to mention for anybody who's interested, starting on Monday, I will be teaching a course about birds and culture for the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia. Each one of the classes starts at 7 o'clock. It's a 6-part class. It goes Monday and Tuesday for 3 consecutive weeks. So it starts on the 16th and ends on December the 1st. But there are still places available in the class if anybody's interested, and you can go to the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia website if you're interested. Most of the classes they teach are for hardcore nature lovers, but this is more of a general course about culture. It deals with art, language, folklore, literature, and lots of other subjects in terms of the way birds have influenced the behavior of people.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight and for a wonderful introduction to the Arctic and the penguins living in it. And to my dear audience, thank you for staying with us. Have a good night.
Okay.